right, so up next, so this is going to be the interesting part of the day for me, because now I'm taking off one hat and I'm putting on another. But your MC will be co-moderating alongside my colleague Luca Belletti. A very exciting panel. I'm very excited about this panel because I wish we had more time, because the level of conversation, the detail, information, the discussion, the collaboration that's taken place just to get ready for this has been incredible. And there's so much more that we could cover than we are actually going to be able to. So we've chosen what we felt collectively were some of the most pertinent use cases. But anyone that you see on this stage, I would be tapping them on the shoulder and, asking when their office hours are. So without further ado, let me call my colleague Luca Belletti up to the stage, and he will introduce us to our panelists.
Hello, hi again. It's me again, but fear not, I'm just introducing this, and then it's going to be your voices we're going to be listening to. I hope you're all refreshed from the break, and welcome to a panel that we put together to give you, the Digital Commons community, an opportunity to share what you're doing with AI, what the concerns are with the AI, the pros and cons, in a conversation. And let me introduce, first of all, the panel. So Traci is moderating this panel, and I'm presenting and giving a little bit of a context at the very beginning. But then we have two speakers that are present with you today, and you might have heard in other presentations and lightning talk. So we got Cyril Oberlander, who's the Dean of University Library at Cal Poly Humboldt. And we have Paul Huffman, who's the University Archivist and Reference Librarian at Lindenwood University. So can I ask you to come and join us on stage, please? Cyril and Paul. And while you take your places, let me show you how we're going to go through this in the next section. This is the welcome and introduction from me. And as I said, I'll give you a little bit of context of AI in the space of the research community, and then a discussion of pros and cons and the tools that are being used. That's going to be moderated by Traci, followed by presentations of 4 use cases or collections of use cases, 2 from the panelists here and 2 from other people from DC community that unfortunately couldn't make it today, but kindly shared their slides and views and notes with us. And we'll end with a discussion on the use cases that we've seen, a Q&A with our panelists, and we go any other. We'd really like to hear from you all what you've been doing in this area and what your specific concerns are. So let's kick off with artificial intelligence. I'm not going to give you a course. I'm by no means an expert. I'm very curious. I'm an early adopter of a few things, but absolutely not an authority in the field. But I thought the first thing to do is we talk about AI, but there are so many different types. And even those that you start to grasp and understand how they work, ChatGPT-3 has become GPT-4, which has become GPT-4o, and then 4o mini. And this is like with monthly releases, Google Notebook LM. It can be quite daunting to keep up with all of this. But let's have a look very, very quickly. Natural language processing is what most of you might be familiar with, which is your ChatGPT and Copilot, Claude, Gemini, etc. I'll show you a few examples afterwards. But that's basically understanding, generating human language from statistical probability of one word following another. So not particularly intelligent, you might say. And best example is ChatGPT. Then there's computer vision. For example, when you use Google Translate with your smartphone camera, you point it at a menu and it translates into your language, or you can have conversations with people. And one use of computer vision, it was on my list of things to do while in the Bay Area in the last couple of days, which was having a ride in a Weibo. so self-driving car, and it was very exciting. I would recommend. Machine learning is something, again, completely different. It's, you train algorithms on a big, large volume of data to detect patterns, and from those patterns make predictions from other sets of data. Speech recognition, something that you might even be using now, maybe, to turn the sounds of my voice into maybe speech on a device to help you understand what I'm saying. Recommendation systems, the one that everybody must have come across is, for example, Amazon recommended purchases based on not only what you've purchased, but also what people with a similar profile might have gone on purchasing afterwards, and much, much complicated than that. And there are many more. I've listed a few there. But for example, I didn't put something that I think it was Anne Gabriel who mentioned yesterday, which was extractive AI. So as you see, there are many missing there. And of course, this is the kind of a snapshot of the state now. Who knows in 6 months, a year, 5 years, where we'll be. And ChatGPT in particular has become kind of the poster child of the current wave of excitement around AI. That's an NLP, so natural language processor, and everybody wants to be in that field now. That has reached kind of general consciousness in the public, and so you've got all the big players want a part of the market there. So there's OpenAI with ChatGPT, Microsoft's got one, Meta and Facebook. Apple just released Apple Intelligence in the latest version of their operating systems. Claude from Anthropic and Gemini from Alphabet / Google. And you might know some or all of them. You might have used one of all of them. And I've started seeing people having a preference for one versus another because of the results they give. I've seen people using certain NLPs like these ones for one task and then another one for a different task. So it can be very fragmented and complicated. And this is now in our hands. Every single person here, I see Traci and Cyril have got their phones there. I've got mine here. It's all in here. And I wanted to check with a quick show of hands. How many people here have tried some of the tools and technologies listed on this slide, for example? Yep. Even if just for fun. How many people have used them at work? Yep. How many people wish they could use them at work, but they can't because of restrictive policies that say you mustn't use this? Okay, that looks good. Because my next question was going to be how many people had used it in spite of the restrictive policies, but we're not going to go there. For the next slide, I'm not going to read it all, but this is all the things that could be done, that people have mentioned, that people have tried. And again, ... at the end, because there are so many more, because tools are coming up, capabilities are being increased, who knows what else we can do. So it's definitely not a complete list, but maybe you can spot in this list some ways that maybe AI can use you, do your jobs better, faster, but I'm sure you're also probably wondering what you will need to give up in exchange. Some control, some authority, quality, perhaps. And that's where we are going to talk with you and with our panelists. And I'm going to hand over to Traci. Next, we're going to look at the pros and cons and the tools that are available.
Thank you, Luca. So on this next slide, you'll see a list of kind of what would appear as a random list of AI-related tools. These are tools that came up in the course of our conversations with our panelists and our collaborators. So You may hear them referenced, and just in case you're not familiar with them, they are here and in the deck, which we will leave behind with you. They are also hyperlinked, so just to make your lives a little bit easier. Would love to say that I used an AI bot to make that happen, but I didn't. So, so without further ado, I want to kick off the conversation with Paul and Cyril, and I want to start with a general concept, and that is, in its current state and in the context that has just been established, what do you see as the pros and cons of AIs in libraries, in practical ways or non? And this is a question for both of you. So, Paul, we'll start with you.
I believe it helps me get tasks done quicker, so that I can work on additional tasks that might have been put on the back burner. And yeah.
Okay, I'll add that. Let me see. I'll add that the pros are that basically there is so many uses of it, and it's still a very creative time to think about how to employ AI. So our students use it, our faculty and staff use it. We know that. But what are they using it for? Well, Ethan Mullock, if you're familiar with him from University of Penn, shows that the students, it gives them a leg up if they're in the lower underperforming students, and that is wonderful. Providing AI feedback in terms of automated generated questions sounds like a horrible idea. But VitalSource has done research to show that in 8,000 textbooks, almost 1 million unique questions that were generated produced a significant amount of learning in about 850,000 applications. So it's a really important time to think about how does learning get impacted and how do we do research. The pros are it's a very powerful tool to streamline and to connect with people. The cons are obvious. It's problematic, it's not well understood, it's a closed system often, and we just don't know if we can trust it. And we all saw The Terminator, correct?
I will add that I know a lot of the platforms are moving towards making their thought processes of the AIs more visible. ChatGPT just came out with their newest version, 01, which it's not fully available yet, but it supposedly shows the train of thought of the AI as it comes up with the answer. But the obvious cons with AI is that you don't want to put personal or sensitive information out there. OpenAI and some of the other companies are kind of notorious for bending the rules as far as training their models, and so we don't want that information to be used in those models.
Thank you. And in terms of, without diving into specific tools that you'll be mentioning later in your use cases, but just thinking more generally, are there preferred tools that you've been dabbling with?
So I use ChatGPT, Google Gemini on a daily basis, Perplexity fairly often. Perplexity, if you're unaware of it, attempts to link out to sources that it's pulled its information from. It's, I guess, the best way I can describe it if you're not familiar with it is it's a Wikipedia for AIs, where it's a good starting point to look for information to guide you to something that would be more useful. I also use Hume AI. Hume has the ability to read people's emotions through the wording that they use. I haven't used it recently, but it also had an ability where if you connect a camera to it, it could read people's facial expressions as well. So it's kind of an interesting bit there. And then lately, I've been tinkering around with Google Notebook LM, which is fascinating with just being able to create FAQs, study guides pretty quickly, and mentioned earlier was the audio podcasts.
Just a quick follow-up question, if I may. I'm just curious. You mentioned Hume AI. What are the ways that you've used that or played around with it?
So earlier this semester, we had new students come by touring the library and the archives where I'm located at. I had a Hume hooked up to a monitor in the archives. Is this dying?
Just kind of speak directly like this.
I had Hume hooked up to a monitor in the AI and just told it, said, hey, we're in the archives right now. I'm going to have students coming in, visiting, and this is what's available in the archives. When they come in, can you greet them and just tell them what's available? And these students were just amazed at the ability to interact with them.
Man, isn't Paul cool? I tell you. I think I'll just share that early on I've used Semantic Scholar for years, and that's a discovery tool for scientific literature that is created from the Allen Institute for Artificial Intelligence in Washington. And it's a remarkably powerful tool along with their reader, the semantic reader. And these are ways to look at our literature in new ways, new facets that are important. But I think the one I want to recommend is Quillbot. And the reason I do that is I show sometimes people who are writing how to look at a paraphraser that allows you to understand not only the words that you've chosen, but also the possibilities of word choices. So it's teaching you how to expand your vocabulary in ways that are very powerful. The others, sure, ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, I love how much fun you can have with it. And it's important to think about playing with AI as not only fun, but it's learning. So you can ask it to create a nice Jeopardy of your favorite topic, and it'll create the Jeopardy board with questions and answers. Or you can ask it to be your favorite author or your favorite fictional character, and then start talking to it to essentially see how it would answer questions. And it's an important way to engage content from a very different perspective. So a lot of these tools are that. It's a way to play with tools to engage content in a new way.
Thank you, Cyril. And I want to follow up with you with a question related to students and specifically how AI can benefit students without discussing what you will be discussing in your specific use case. What other ways do you see, or do you envision AI improving the life of the student researcher?
Too many ways to count, I tell you. Okay, so a study says that about 67% of students are using AI to find information. And then about 30% are using it to help write. So I think a lot of times that is one of the powerful ways for students to start thinking about expanding their understanding of information that's out there, as long as they know to please ask it to cite your sources, and then that gives them a little bit more of a connection to the original sources, although it is inaccurate at times. I think the automatic generated questions is a very powerful example of how do we make things more interactive and engaging for our student researchers and learners, whether it's learning a concept or exploring the research topic. I think these tools are very powerful at explaining what can the research question be and what are the sources and concepts that you need to know to get there. So I'll cover some in detail, but a lot of it is focused around research projects. AI is a very powerful tool for research project design and carry through. So how do we empower our students? Well, this is a set of tools that can help them in many ways. Lastly, and I'm guessing a lot of our institutions are now subscribing to tutoring AI services. But increasingly, that is a component in a suite of services to make sure that they are successful. So what's the relationship we have as a library to student success AI services? Something we have to figure out.
Paul, I have one question for you, and then we'll do a wrap-up question for both of you before we move into the next section. But conversely, for which use cases in the researcher or library community would you discourage the use of AI, and why?
Well, I mentioned it earlier. If in cases where students are using sensitive information and things that might be proprietary, we don't want the students to use that. So, I'm sorry.
No, that makes sense. Yep. Thank you for reinforcing that. Okay, final question for both of you. Cyril, I'll start with you. If you could wave the magic wand, the product magic wand, what would Digital Commons do differently, and how might AI support that? Different or better?
Okay, do you guys ready for a list? Okay, here goes. Okay, I think it would be useful to have a chatbot. A lot of people want a chatbot that does some integration or conversation with content. Why that is, we're actually in an interesting, I will call it unfamiliar reality, where people are engaging a AI tool to help them have a conversation with reading the material. So it's a fascinating time. So find more relevant information using natural language queries is a very powerful list of, I would like to see that. Finding meaningful ways to engage readers. We have this tool now called exhibits. Why can't an AI tool start creating some exhibits for us that we can review? And why not take advantage of the Digital Commons network to make it even more powerful? That would be a great way to promote all of our works and make an engaging content. What that really means is that our PDFs are increasingly not the place to start from. It's actually an interactive in front of the content. And that's what AI does really well. If you could start doing some geo-referencing of aerial photographs, I would really appreciate that. That's one of our projects. And there are a number of other things, but find ways to inspire learning, find ways to inspire interaction. Those are important elements. And I would finish up with saying, find a way to help us promote our IR works and how much of a difference it makes in the lives of our communities. Because you and libraries are both facing I would say, an existential crisis of sorts. Increasingly, the competition is becoming fierce, and it is getting messier and messier. And if you want us to succeed, we have to do it together by making it an inspiring learning environment like libraries have always been.
Thank you so much. Paul?
So, as mentioned, chatbots would be good, and to be able to talk with a chatbot. I think, we've mentioned large language models. There you go. Thanks. Large language models. Increasingly, I think we'll see in the future where they won't be necessarily large language models, but specific to particular institutions or institutional repositories. So we can have an AI that knows all the content on our site. If a researcher asks for content on a specific topic, they can do something similar to Amazon search where it does recommended content. And those individual AIs will be able to communicate with all the AIs from all the other institutional repositories to direct them to those spots as well. On the back end, the areas where we have to input HTML, I think that's a simple task for having an AI just create the HTML formats for information that we're putting into the back end. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you both. And there will be time for Q&A at the end as well. I have so many more questions that I could ask, but we do want to move on to the next section, actually exploring some individual use cases. So the first two use cases are from contributors who unfortunately could not be here in person, but we want to give them special thanks for preparing their slides in advance. And up first is a use case from Jenna Nolt, the Digital Initiatives Librarian at Kenyon. I think we have some other Kenyon representatives here in the room. So I'll kick off with her. So Kenyon College is a liberal arts college in rural Ohio, where critical engagement is a cornerstone of the educational model. Jenna has been in her current role at Kenyon for over a decade, where she not only manages Digital Kenyon, which is Kenyon's institutional repository, but also works to integrate new and emerging technologies into the pedagogy of the college, along with teaching information literacy. Since the spring of 2023, she has worked extensively and broadly with AI alongside 2 student interns, testing its capabilities in a variety of settings, learning the basics of how it is coded, and analyzing where it is and isn't appropriate to use in higher education. So for the purpose of this slide,
There are more notes, but I
can't, is it possible to scroll up on in the back?
otherwise I've got a backup here. I can read the rest myself. Or Tracy, I've got them here if you want to.
Sure, please continue, thank you. Okay. Oh, wait, there we go. Okay, so for the purposes of this slide, AI refers specifically to generative artificial intelligence, and her research focused primarily on large language models. Jenna has given talks to a variety of audiences on AI and wants to encourage everyone to engage more with this new technology that is already ubiquitous in every corner of our personal and professional lives, whether or not we have made a conscious choice about it. She's included her email on this slide and is happy to chat with anyone interested in critically engaging with this topic further, especially if you disagree with her. She does not consider herself an AI expert, rather a facilitator to encourage others. The foundation of her research was understanding the basics of how AI works so she could figure out where it would and would not be useful. With this format, it's challenging to cover details, but the key points are as follows. Number 1, what differentiates the generative AI of the present from AIs of fiction, like Skynet or Terminator? We won't be back. GLaDOS from the Portal games, or Hal from 2001: A Space Odyssey, making a cameo on the slide, is that generative AI is not sentient, nor is there any reason to believe the current trajectory of development will create artificial sentience. So it can't feel, y'all. Number 2, the quality of AI is entirely dependent on the data sets it is trained on and has access to. A simplified understanding of the inputs is data sets plus coding plus input equals output. While the processing is so intensive that humans can't understand exactly what AI does with the data, this is sometimes referred to as the black box, we can understand where the data is coming from. Number 3, because this kind of model is dependent on human-generated data to be built, and because companies are already running out of human-generated data sets, Jenna does not think that this trajectory of AI development will evolve much beyond what it is right now for the foreseeable future. Number 4, based on the current flaws of AI and the likelihood that it will not continue to develop much beyond this point, Jenna is critical of integrating it directly into institutional repositories and does not feel it should be implemented in any capacity without humans to quality check its output. She also recognizes that this is not a popular opinion, as Google has already chosen to do so. However, within the context of the above, Jenna does think AI has a great time saver in her repository admin duties. Paul? similar to your thought process. Specifically, she recommends using it to strip unwanted formatting out of PDF abstracts that are being added to metadata fields. She also recommends using it to format text into HTML for collection descriptions. She sees a lot of potential for improving accessibility via optical character recognition and generating closed captioning and transcripts. She also sees the potential to use chatbots to direct users to specific content within the repository, either from the homepage or from an institution's main website. So we're seeing some themes here. Thank you, Jenna. And again, she particularly wants naysayers, so you've got her email, you see there.
All right, so I might have to contact her because I disagree with some of her points. But so my experience with AI began in late 2022 when ChatGPT came out with their 3.5 model, which I think that's when most of the world really became much more aware of it. And my initial interactions with it was just to test it out on different things. I initially came at it from a perspective of a university archivist or a historian, and I took the diary of one of Lindenwood's founders, Mary Sibley. We had turned it into a 92-page PDF, and I had uploaded it to ChatGPT, just asked it to summarize it. And it did a very fantastic job at summarizing the key themes that came across her diary. But when I went in and tried to ask it for some specifics about different things I knew were in the content, then I was finding that it was coming up with hallucinations and some things that were not correct and something that I would not want out in the public. And so at the time, I kind of laid it to the side thinking, I'll just wait till there's been some improvements with AI. It wasn't much longer, about a year later, they came out with 3.5 where you could create custom models. And so I looked at it as a way to maybe create my own AI for the archives. And what I did was create uploaded a bunch of key documents on Lindenwood history. And it was decent on a lot of Lindenwood history, but there was a lot of hallucinations. Another problem with it at the time was ChatGPT had a limited amount of memory that you could upload documents to it, and so the initial documents that you would upload to it would initially fall off. And while it might have known some information earlier, if that information was in the early material that you uploaded to it, it would drop off and they would forget that information. So again, I was going to put it aside, and it wasn't much longer when Gemini came out with their version of custom AIs. And what made them significant was that you could upload substantially more material than ChatGPT, like 4 or 5 times more material. And I was able to upload about 1,500 pages of Lindenwood history to it. It was very good at Lindenwood history. I would say probably better than the vast majority of people knowing about Lindenwood history. My concern was that even though it was very good with it, it would have some of these like minor discrepancies, errors that I wasn't comfortable with people looking at and believing. So for like the average person that would think that, hey, Google Gemini is really good at Lindenwood history, they would be very accepting of maybe these minor errors. So I put that aside and began looking at it from a perspective of an IR manager. And so, as IR managers, you're probably pretty familiar that sometimes there's not keywords that are submitted with material. Sometimes summaries of the material is kind of lackluster. So I take these documents and add it to ChatGPT. Am I holding it wrong?
Just get it close as close as
Okay. And, it would take fairly detailed or lengthy documents, and it would create keywords very rapidly. No?
Just give it very close to you.
It would create keywords very rapidly, and And you know, if I needed a summary, I'd tell the AI, hey, can you create a summary 350 words or less? And it was very good at doing that. So I found that to be very useful. I mentioned earlier that I've used it to create HTML for some of the back-end work. Sometimes, you know, if you're trying to figure out a subject to choose from the taxonomy list that Digital Commons has, sometimes it can be difficult to pinpoint one for that. You can upload a document, upload the taxonomy, and it will tell you which subject headings would be best for that item. And then one other thing that I found useful was I was taking oral history projects that we had done and uploaded it to Google Gemini. And I would tell it, hey, this is the person that is being interviewed. I'm one of the interviewees. There was another professor that was with me doing the interviewing and said, can you transcribe this? And it's able to transcribe the documents very quickly. And I don't know exactly how it does it. I'm sure it's done through inference. It was able to properly attribute who said what in audio without me telling me whose voice was whose. So that was pretty significant. It's a so AI is a time-saving tool that we can use. I personally feel that it's moving in the direction of personal assistance. I'm looking forward to the day when I can walk through my office door and the AI will greet me and say, hey, Paul, this is the different things that you have scheduled for today. This takes priority over this, and I can ask it questions throughout the day. It's a very useful tool. I tell students nearly every day that you're going to have to learn it as quickly as possible because it's like the tsunami that's coming at us. We're going to have to be prepared how to deal with it, or it's just going to blindside us. And 20, 30 years ago, you know, in the job market, people were expected to know Microsoft products or different types of software. This is the sort of thing that repository managers or students are going to have to know if they're going to succeed in the workforce. And then lastly, the current state of AI, I would say trust it but verify. I would equate it to maybe an intern or a grad student working in your institution where you're probably going to produce pretty reliable material, but you're still going to have to check it to make sure that everything is accurate. So.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you, Paul. And there's a nice segue with the next contribution, which is by Helena Marvin. Lena, again, she regrets not being able to attend the conference, but she's named ChatGPT intern Chad GPT. And it's exactly what you were saying, Paul, the fact that you can consider that to be an intern that needs adjusting, correcting, and then hopefully learns very fast. And she's used ChatGPT and OpenAI's LLM chatbot to transform informal notes into formal text. And when Digital Commons hosted a mentorship program, when Lena and her mentee came to the end of the year, Lena pasted all of her notes into ChatGPT and asked it to produce a final report, which it did, saving loads of time and mental effort. Becoming familiar with LLMs made identifying hallucinated citations that were submitted as interlibrary loan requests faster and easier as well. She also used ChatGPT to generate a message to inform patrons that a citation was suspected of being an AI hallucination. If it doesn't matter if the output is true or if you have the expertise to verify the accuracy of the output, and you're willing to accept full responsibility for what is produced, including acknowledging your use of Gen AI technology, it's incredibly powerful and even fun to use. Here on this slide in the middle, there's a flow chart. I don't know if it's readable from over there, but you'll see it in the slides where what I've just said is laid out very, very clearly, resulting in an output, possible to use Gen AI with care and acknowledgement, or unsafe to use Gen AI. In addition to turning Lena's informal language into acceptable academic communications, she's also used ChatGPT to create a search widget to support the university marketing team, so they could have an easy portal to faculty members who are available and up for speaking to the press. And our final contribution is going to be here, live from Cyril.
Can I push these? I got to get
Of
through
course,
these
yeah.
slides.
Yeah.
I went crazy and did some extra slides here. So I'm going to tell a little story about students because I think they're the best things in the world. They are so amazing, these folks. So after giving a presentation for 2 hours about the animatage table, which is a digital dissection table in the library, I know it sounds weird, but I thought, I wonder if anybody has done plants. And sure enough, I did not find anybody who's done photogrammetry of plants. So I posed the challenge to students in the computer science software engineering class. Can you build me an inspiring 3D touchscreen botany experience that we could work together on? And in the course of about 10 weeks, Team Flora developed the first prototype for the 3D digital herbarium, which allows you to annotate and show 3D plants in a new way and connect it to iNaturalist and other things. In the course of the year, we actually built it. We hired the student and hired other botany students to develop this idea and release it. And then it can go from there to open source. It's been released. What do we want to do with it? Two undergraduate students built the first neural computer in 1950 in Harvard. Undergraduate students can do amazing things. Sometimes we just have to invite them to the challenge. So we did this recently in the fall. We said to the computer software engineering students, we have this challenge for you. We have about 350,000 government documents that we don't know anything about them, but we'd love you to create a tool that automates the process of finding out the information about the books. So what they did is they essentially took a challenge and they said, okay, what do you want to find out? And how can we take pictures of these things? So we developed a technique where you could take a picture of either the book or the stock number or LC number, the call number, and you can have it go through a text detection method that uses 2 machine learning processes that they created. One is to recognize handwritten text so that those handwritten call numbers will be actually recognized, and the other is the typed text. And then basically we get production of a list of everything that is in our collection. Now, it's surprising, this actually, they did the testing of how fast this is compared to the speed of just going ahead and typing them. Does anybody want to know how fast the AI did it versus how fast we did it? Well, here's the data. Essentially, 24 months of the hand typing allowed us to list 4,058 government documents. The photo metadata extractor tool in 3 months did over 9,206 items. It's a substantial increase in the amount of work we can do that isn't typing these lists. And that's beautiful. You could do it for gift books, you could do it for government document books, but really what it is giving students a real-world challenge to learn machine learning to solve our problems. It's a phenomenal way of working with students, and I highly recommend it. Because in this sense, what we're also doing them is giving a use case, having them work with stakeholders, learn how to do something that is productive and really impactful. So the photo metadata extractor tool, there were 3 students initially, Kay Vargas, Brian Portillo, Evan Putnam, and then the metadata librarian, government documents librarian, and I spent, Bree Hagan, and I spent maybe 3 to 5 hours with these students, and they produce this kind of results. There's a lot of ways we should play with AI. If you got my annual report, you see the illustrations are done by Adobe Firefly. It's important for us to take time to play with these things, and then wherever possible, challenge students to do something that automates our processes, because we can use that time elsewhere. And for anyone who's afraid of jobs, at ALA San Diego, it was great to hear from the San Diego Economic Commission, Development Commission, that businesses that started to use AI actually hired more people than they reduced staffing. So I think we should at least feel a little safe that the road ahead is very interesting and we can make a difference here. Thank you. Oh gosh, and I even have more to talk about. I'll say a couple more use cases. One is we currently use Adobe Photoshop AI to stitch aerial photographs together for the GIS data archive that we're building. And the fall students are currently working on doing AI georeferencing of our collection of over 40,000 aerial images, aerial photographs that we're taking, so that we can ingest them with at least 3 georeference data points. That's a big deal. That's basically so we can actually make maps and aerial photographs machine readable without all the staff time that's required to do so. We're also looking at adapting Cal Poly Slow's chatbot that was trained on Digital Commons for their special collections, and so much more. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Cyril. And I also appreciated that you put the GitHub links to the code for this last project, but also for the photo metadata extractor tool. So anybody who should be so inclined can, once you receive the slides, go and see how that was done, and maybe do it for your own repository.
How much time is left? We have time for 2 questions? Okay. Okay. Thank you, Keenan. Yes. He's coming with a mic. Oh, there's another one right up, just a couple tables in front as well.
Hi. This is going to be a little clunky. I apologize. Every time I attend a panel like this about AI in libraries and archives, I ask the same question about environmental impact. And I get the same answer of like, we're going to deal with it when we get there. And I think we as a collective all experienced yesterday like the tiniest climate crisis. And we are now seeing Appalachia destroyed. Hurricane Milton is possibly going to be a Category 6 hurricane, which is like not a thing that's ever happened. Like we are in the climate crisis now. And this is less of a question. I would like to hear your thoughts on environmental impact. But I would also like to encourage like a culture of testing and more like thoughtful approach to diving into these tools. We don't always have to rush into like the newest technology just to keep up. And often when we do, we then realize the horrific impacts of them down the line. So a lot of like monitoring software for testing that came out during lockdown, we then learned later that it had racial bias and was failing students of color. But we as institutions like rushed into using it because it was new and exciting. So I just, in a room full of very smart people, want to encourage like a more thoughtful approach instead of just like, oh, there's an AI tool for everything, so I'm going to use it for everything. And really, are there tools that are making impact without like horrific destruction as well? But also thoughts. Thank you so much.
I'm happy to share that. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. Right now is a really good time to understand that we're in a messy transformational moment. The attraction to new technology is part of our culture, and yet we have to be intentional. And so how do you do both? So part of it is we need to play to build an awareness, and we also need to push on ethical use of AI and also open models. If they're all closed, it is very difficult. Sustainability, the climate crisis, I think one of the things that we're hoping AI does, and there's a lot of efforts in this, the Climax of the, they just won an award from UCLA. They're trying to create enough models to better predict what can make a difference in the climate. So AI is probably going to be a partner in how do we actually solve this thing, but it does come to intentionality of action. So you're absolutely right. We need that. Thank you.
Yeah, there's definitely concern about the amount of energy use from AI. I read a stat just within the last week where even though it is very energy consuming at this point, it's about 2%. AI uses about 2% of all energy production here in the US right now. So it's still a small amount of the overall energy production in the country right now. I know Microsoft just made a deal to open up 3 Mile Island to create nuclear power for processing centers. So whether your thoughts on nuclear power is, I mean, there's that. And then Google, I know, has just come out with some new chips that substantially reduces the amount of power being used for AI. And I think there's AI models that are using less energy too. So there are efforts to address that. Yeah.
If I may, just to close this, I want to thank you very much for the question, and it is something that at Elsevier we are constantly thinking about. I haven't got an answer about the usage of energy, but in terms of not rushing into things, principles, ethics, that is very much worked on and established. You can search, I believe, just searching Elsevier and AI, probably you'll be directed to a page where you can find out more about it. And that's one of the benefits, for me working as a product manager in a company that is thinking of that. And I think for you as customers and users of Digital Commons being part of Elsevier to see what we're doing about that and what we're thinking about. Thank you.
Okay, final question.
I loved your question, Evelyn. Thank you. It will be a bit easier, I think, but maybe not that much. So, so AI is centered on language. And I was wondering, well, you've all heard my great accent. I'm not English speaking. Have you tested any AI tool in other languages than English?
I have. So I've had students working with me who are from Serbia and South Africa, and had them test out the AIs in their language, and it said it was able to answer them in a knowledgeable manner. So.
And the performance overall was equivalent to the English when you use it in English?
So not all AIs are the same. I would say the one that was very successful at it was ChatGPT. I'm not sure about some of the others.
Excellent. Okay, well, I wish we had more time, but again, you do have contact information for our panelists and collaborators who were not present today within the deck. So let's please give them a big round of applause. Mm-hmm.